All right, let's dive in today. We're going deep on a topic that honestly could really hit your wallet pretty hard: U.S. tariffs and how they're messing with the whole global supply chain thing. We've got some interesting bits from U.S. tariffs, global supply chains, and economic consequences, a paper by my pension advisor, and, well, it gets kind of wild.
Yeah, it's not just about adding a tax to some products,
Yes, yeah.
It's more about understanding the whole web of connection, suppliers, manufacturers, all the transportation involved. It's all affected by these decisions, and it can be pretty hard to predict what'll happen.
So, let's start with these unforeseen consequences the paper talks about. It says that almost a third of everything the U.S. imports comes from Canada and Mexico. That's pretty deeply connected, right? Especially for things like cars. I mean, parts cross the border so many times during production. But then, boom, tariffs hit, and suddenly everything's a mess.
Right. Think about it. You're a car company. Suddenly the parts you get from Mexico are way more expensive. You can't just switch suppliers overnight. Finding a new one that's good enough, making new contracts, figuring out all the logistics, it takes time. Plus you've got all these non-tariff barriers, different safety rules in different countries, all that stuff. It's a huge headache.
Yeah, I bet. So, what happens in the meantime? Do businesses just sort of swallow that extra cost?
Some might try, I guess, but usually those costs get passed along to us, the consumers. The report lays out a few possibilities. One, we get higher inflation on, well, everything. Two, to fight that inflation, the central banks raise interest rates. Or three, our taxes go up to cover the government's costs. Not exactly great options, are they?
Ugh, no, it all sounds kind of painful for everyone involved. And speaking of pain, this isn't just a US thing. The paper mentions that Trump has even talked about tariffs on the EU. What does that mean for, say, the UK economy? How would they be affected?
It's all connected, right? Think of it like this. The UK and the Eurozone, they're big trading partners. So if tariffs weaken the Eurozone, they have less money to buy UK goods. And that hits jobs, investments, everything over here. Plus, if the European Central Bank cuts interest rates to help their economy, the Bank of England might have to do the same just to stay competitive.
Wow. So
Yeah.
even if we don't have direct tariffs with the US, we still get caught in the crossfire. It's all connected.
Exactly. Global trade, it's like a giant spider web, right? You pull on one strand, the whole thing shakes. And that kind of leads into another thing the paper talks about, fat tails.
Okay, fat tails. That sounds kind of technical. What does that even mean?
Basically, it means that when things are uncertain, like with all these trade wars going on, the chances of some really big market swings, like really big, become much higher. Remember when the market went crazy after Trump announced tariffs on Mexico and Canada? That's fat tails happening. And for someone like you, it means your retirement savings, investments, all that could go up and down a lot more than usual.
Okay, that's a little scary to think about. So we've got these crazy supply chains, unpredictable trade moves, and now the market could go haywire any minute. It's a lot.
Yeah, it definitely shows how important it is to be careful and adaptable with all these global changes happening.
We're back and still digging into these U.S. tariffs and how they could really shake things up globally. It's a lot to take in, but like we said before, the more you know, the better off you are in situations like this.
Definitely. And you know what? Something people might not realize is that not everyone loses in a trade war. Some countries might actually benefit, at least, for a bit.
Really? So how does that work? If the U.S. puts tariffs on things from China, who wins in that situation?
Okay, imagine you can't get your cheap electronics from China anymore, right? What do? You start looking for other options. So countries that can make things cheaper or don't have as many trade barriers, they get a chance to step in. They become the new suppliers, and their economies could get a boost.
So it's kind of like when your favorite coffee shop raises their prices and you got to find a new one. You're grumpy at first, but then you find this awesome new place, even better coffee.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the thing. That advantage might not last. If all these tariffs keep going and it turns into a huge trade war, with everyone putting up barriers and fighting back, the whole global economy takes a hit, and then everyone loses.
Like starting a food fight. Seems fun at first, but then everyone's covered in mashed potatoes and no one's happy. So how do we avoid that? What can businesses do to protect themselves when things are so unpredictable?
The paper really stresses the importance of being flexible and resilient. Companies can't rely on just one supplier or one market anymore. They need to diversify, spread their risk, and be ready to change plans quickly when something unexpected happens.
So don't put all your eggs in one basket. Smart move, especially when the market's so shaky.
You got it. And it's also about using technology to help you see what's coming and adapt faster. Imagine a company that can track global trade, see potential disruptions as they're happening. They can change their suppliers and stay ahead of the curve, even with all the uncertainty.
Okay, that makes sense for big companies. But what about like regular people? What can we do to handle this crazy economic situation?
First thing, stay informed, like you're doing right now listening to this deep dive. Understand what could happen to your finances. Prices going up, maybe interest rates increase, or even your investments could change.
So don't just ignore it and hope it goes away.
Definitely not. And don't be afraid to ask questions. If you're worried about your retirement savings, talk to a financial advisor. If grocery prices are freaking you out, look into local options, maybe adjust your budget. Knowledge is power. It helps you make better choices.
Another thing that stood out to me in the paper was how these tariffs might actually lead to more innovation. Like, could they force businesses to be more creative and self-reliant?
That's a good point. And it's kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, if companies can't get their usual supplies, they might have to come up with new products or processes themselves here at home. That could lead to some cool breakthroughs and help certain parts of the economy.
So, like, necessity is the mother of invention. Yeah, I can see that.
Exactly. But there's the other side, too. Tariffs can also make it really expensive for companies to get the materials and parts they need to innovate in the first place. So it could stifle creativity and slow things down in other areas. It's complicated, and what happens probably depends on the industry and the overall economic situation.
It sounds like we just got to watch and see how things play out. But
Yeah,
even if we can't predict the future, we can at least get prepared, right?
exactly. And the best way to do that is to be flexible and ready to adapt, just like those businesses we talked about. Individuals need to be ready to change their plans as things change, maybe learn new skills, look into different career paths, just be open to new possibilities.
Like learning to surf. You can't control the waves, but you can learn to ride them and have fun doing it. And speaking of riding waves, there's one big question I want to get into before we wrap up this part, and it goes beyond just economics.
Okay, I'm listening. What is it?
Let's talk about the environment. If all these global supply chains get reshuffled, what happens to the planet? That's what we'll explore in part 3. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive on those U.S. tariffs and all the crazy stuff happening in the global economy. We've talked about how it hits your wallet, how it affects countries around the world, and now it's time to tackle the big one, the environment.
Yeah, you can't really talk about all these supply chain changes without thinking about what it means for the planet. It's a huge piece of the puzzle.
So, like, if these tariffs actually do end up changing where stuff is made and how it's shipped, what could happen to the environment?
Well, it's complicated. There are a lot of things going on. But let's start with transportation. Right now, a lot of the stuff we buy travels really far, by ship or plane, and those are big polluters. If tariffs make companies start sourcing stuff closer to home, that could mean less pollution.
So instead of a t-shirt coming all the way from, say, Bangladesh to the UK, maybe it gets made in Portugal or even closer. That seems like it would help with the carbon footprint, right? But is it really that easy?
It might not be. Just moving production doesn't fix everything. We also need to think about where those new factories are being built and what kind of environmental rules they have. If production goes to countries with, like, weaker standards, we could see more pollution, deforestation, all sorts of bad stuff.
It's like pushing down on one side of a water balloon, the other side just pops up. So it's not just about where things are made, but also how they're made, right?
Yeah. Exactly. You got to look at the whole life of a product. The raw materials, the manufacturing, how much energy it takes. Are companies using sustainable materials? Are they trying to be energy efficient? Are they minimizing waste and pollution? All that matters.
Kind of like picking between two coffee shops, right? One might be closer, but the other might use fair trade coffee in those compostable cups. You have to weigh all the factors.
Perfect example. And it shows why transparency and accountability are so important in these global supply chains. People are starting to care more about the environment, and they want to know where their stuff comes from, how it's made.
So it's not just on governments and businesses to do the right thing, right? We all have a part to play as consumers.
Absolutely. If we support companies that care about sustainability, it encourages them to do more. And we can cut down on our own consumption, reuse stuff, recycle, make smarter choices about what we buy.
It's realizing that even small actions, when a lot of people do them, can make a big difference. We said at the beginning that knowledge is power, especially when things are uncertain. And that's really true here.
Totally agree. The more we understand about how trade, economics, and the environment are all connected, the better choices we can make. As individuals, as consumers, and as citizens, we can push for policies that are good for both the economy and the environment. We can support businesses that are doing things the right way. And we can make choices in our own lives that reflect our values.
Well said. Well, folks, it looks like we've reached the end of our deep dive. We've covered some really complex stuff today, and it's a lot to think about. Tariffs, supply chains, economic impacts, the environment, it's all connected.
It is, but remember, even little steps in the right direction can make a difference. Stay informed, ask questions, make good choices. We can all work towards a better future, one that's good for people and the planet.
I couldn't have put it better myself. And to all our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned some useful stuff and feel like you can handle whatever comes next in this crazy world. Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep making a difference.